Okay, back now to our story on U.S. tariffs. The New York Federal Reserve says companies and consumers are bearing the brunt of the cost for most of the Trump tariff. Let's bring in former General Counsel and founder of GC Support Services, Nadine Jones. Nadine, I hope you can hear me right now. So what do you make of these figures from the Federal Reserve of New York and Columbia University that says that 90% of the burden of tariffs and taxes falls to the U.S. consumer and companies? Because there was a feeling at one stage, in fact, Trump administration officials did say that some of the increase in those costs would be absorbed by the exporters, by the manufacturers themselves. But like I said, the figure is 90%.
I'm having been in the logistics field for a number of years, I'm not surprised by the numbers at all. It's going to be the U.S. importer of record that bears the brunt of the cost of the tariffs, of the duties and taxes when those goods hit the port at the United States. And the thought that the foreign seller would disrupt a supply contract that's probably in place for 3 to 5 years, where their price is set, maybe some fluctuations allowed for like currency exchanges and fuel surcharges, but where your base price is set, the thought that the foreign shipper, exporter, is going to interrupt the contract and say, you know what, I think I want to charge you a lower price, seemed unlikely to me. So the majority of international shipments and Incoterms are such that the foreign seller puts the goods on the boat, on the plane, and that's the end of its dealings with the goods. And it's the U.S. importer that is going to bear the cost of the duties and the taxes and so forth. Not impossible for the foreign shipper, of course, to compensate or reimburse for duties, but that in very rare instances are those the Incoterms or are those the negotiations in place. So I was not surprised.
Right. Nadine, to what extent is this something of a disconnect? Because, you know, we hear of the prices going up and that 90% of consumers and companies are paying for that. But at the same time, we had figures out today which show that the inflation rate is actually falling. The figures released this morning show it's fallen to 2.4%.
Right. How do you reconcile the two? Okay.
Yeah.
Because the higher tariff costs are not necessarily embedded in the consumer price. So you've got the U.S. importers paying a higher cost, but they could be eating that cost. And so when we go to the store and we buy off the shelf, we're not seeing any differences there. How long they can sustain that is another question. So there might be a lag time before consumers really feel the brunt of the tariffs. That could be one thing. I suspect that's one thing. Another thing is, I think some U.S. sellers had a lot of pre-tariff inventory. So the goods that are making it to the shelves are not the tariffed goods. Again, a lagging indicator, because eventually they're going to run out of the pre-tariff inventory and they're going to have to start stocking the shelves with tariff goods. You might see another lag, and you might see a bump in consumer prices there. So yes, absolutely, the influx to the U.S. Treasury is coming from Americans, but who? Is it the importer or is it the consumer? And I think by the CPI index being stable, we're seeing that the importer is not necessarily embedding its higher costs into the consumer prices yet. That's my take.
So this will hit the pocketbooks of consumers, but what kind of impact would it have on the broader economy?
Well, if it's a lagging indicator, then eventually it's going to catch up. Even if the Supreme Court were to wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, we think those IEEPA tariffs are unconstitutional or otherwise unlawful, you still have a whole year of tariffed goods that still need to be sold. So there might still be an impact there. I think what will probably be longer term is you're going to see a shift in the supply chain, right? So where you used to have a very stable, reliable give and take of the exporters flowing into exported goods flowing in from certain countries into the U.S., now new relationships have been formed where they're sending their goods to somebody else, another country that might be tomato for the exporter at origin, and maybe there's less dynamic, it's a lot more stable. So they might say, I think, I love the US, but I think I'm going to keep selling over here because everything is stable. So we don't know yet really what the fallout is going to be, but I suspect that supply chains have been changed and new relationships formed. It will be a big part of the fallout that we see from this.